Welcome back to Conscious Caregiving with L&L. I'm your co-host, Lance A. Slatton. And as always, I'm joined by my esteemed colleague and friend, Lori La Bey. Welcome, Lori. How are you?
I am thrilled to be here as usual, Lance. Can't wait for our conversation.
Always great to see you, Lori. I know, we were talking previously and we were talking about an issue that I think a lot of families don't often know about or understand. And that's really, how do you pay for home care? There's a lot of things in the news about, Medicare and, hospice and all these different things. And sometimes home care automatically just gets lumped into that unknowingly. And we thought we'd have a conversation about different ways to pay for home care and ways you can't pay for home care.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I get a lot of calls from people about, my loved one was in the hospital and now they have to leave and we need home care and we don't know where to go or what to do or how this is paid for or for how long. And they just get really overwhelmed with that. So you're the expert on home care. So why don't you take the lead on this one and
Yeah, and I think it's an important topic. It may not be relevant to somebody today, but in the future, it very well could be. And so, we want to just go through and describe the different ways that home care is paid for and the ways that it's not paid for. And, interestingly enough, Lori, we still get calls from discharge planners at the hospital who have a patient that's being ready to be discharged and they're going home with home care. And a lot of times, home care and home health care get kind of crossed in, the language, and they're used kind of synonymously, and they're really two distinct entities. Home health care provides for a skilled care need, and that's your physical, occupational therapist, social worker can come and get involved, even a dietitian, registered nurse. And Medicare will pay for that with a doctor's order for up to 9 weeks at a time and for as long as that skilled care need requires it. So, for instance, if somebody has a wound, they get that order for home health care. The wound care nurse will come, they're going to assess it, they're going to treat it, they're going to manage it, but they're already kind of deciding or summarizing and projecting the outcome of their care for that wound and the best that they can get it to. So it may not cure something, it may not entirely reverse something, but they have a feeling that they can get it to a certain point where then it will kind of plateau, meaning they're going to get it the best that they can. So not all 9 weeks may always be needed. But like in my father's situation, we had home health care and wound care nurses for over 2 years coming to the home because, again, he had multiple surgeries and they still felt like they could improve the healing of that wound and its outcome. But if they at any time reached the point where they felt like they got it as good as they could, then the home health care would be discontinued. Another thing about home health care, it's a great resource for families, especially for those coming home from a surgery and different things, and maybe they have transportation issues and they have Medicare. Medicare can come to the home and provide that physical therapy, that occupational therapy. Now, sometimes there's equipment needed that you can't provide at the home, so there may not be an alternative. But a lot of times, if it's physical therapy that's able to be provided in the home, it's a great option for families. Now, home care, we supplement that, but we also can work independent of that as well. So sometimes a family will have home health care and they'll say, well, we'll have your services once home health care finishes up, because they think it's a conflict or they contradict each other. And in fact, they actually supplement and can complement each other, and they can work independent of each other. We provide services that home health care can't provide. They provide services that we can't provide. So it's a wonderful match, meaning if you have a registered nurse or a wound care nurse coming to the home, or the physical therapist, they might only come 1, 2, or 3 times a week, and they're only going to be there for less than an hour. Dictated by Medicare guidelines, they have to be in the home for 60 minutes. Not all 60 minutes are used necessarily on the care directly. They might use 15, 20 minutes of that to chart and update their notes and send in their reports as well. But what they're not going to do is help dad get up, get dressed, make sure he has a good meal, make sure those morning meds were taken. If he needs, help getting in and out of the shower, or, any number of activities of daily living, home health care can't and won't provide that. So that's where we come in. And we also are a great benefit for families when their loved one is getting physical therapy. I've had loved ones, I'm sure you have, Lori, that have received physical therapy. Often those instructions after that appointment are, all right, now when you go home, you're coming here Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Now, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, you need to do these sets of exercises on your own. Not often are they going to be done, right? And so when we're in the home, we're then, encouraging and supporting the loved one to be able to continue doing those exercises so that they're continuing to get stronger and increasing their endurance and things. And often when physical therapy discharges a patient, they'll then leave our staff a lot of different exercises and instructions to continue that trajectory on that strengthening just for the betterment of the loved one. So, how do you pay for home care though? Home care, like I said, cannot be paid for by Medicare, unfortunately. We hope someday that's going to change, but as we all know, Medicare is, rife with fraud, and it's already hard enough to contain that fraud. I don't know that they want to introduce another service as well. And then you have states like Michigan that are non-licensed, non-regulated. So we would have to have special guidelines and get Michigan to become licensed so that then we can follow a uniform pattern across the country instead of just being, kind of an orphan where we can kind of do how we please, in the sense that I was sharing with you. If you had a delivery driver delivering your Amazon package today and he was tired of his job at Amazon and he was in Michigan, we could technically hire him. It doesn't mean we should, and we definitely wouldn't, but we could, and that's unfortunate. I talked to a elder law attorney in California one time, and he was saying, it's really sad and unfortunate because I have to have a licensed plumber to come in my home to fix a leaky faucet. But in Michigan, I could have anybody come in to take care of my grandmother who has pills all over and has all these complicated medical conditions. It's just, it's kind of one of those unfortunate loopholes we still have right now. And we're hopeful that one day that will change. But regardless of that, when families are looking for home care, we like to stress and make sure they understand private health insurance is not going to cover or pay for home care services, nor is Medicare. But the ways that you can pay for home care is if you or your loved one served in a recognized declared war. So on their DD 214, they had active wartime status. That veteran, wartime veteran, or even their spouse qualifies as being married to that wartime veteran, there's a benefit called aid and attendance. And you fill out a form, the doctor helps fill it out, you submit it. Once you get approved, because other than the wartime status, then you have to look at the financial qualifications. And we always advise people, talk to an elder law attorney or a VA specialist that can help guide you through that procedure, because it is complicated. It can take a very long time because we're dealing with the VA. But if they qualify, they can get several $1,000s a month to help pay for care and help to supplement the cost of care. Now, aside from the VA, there's also long-term care insurance. Long-term care insurance is one of the greatest benefits that most people aren't familiar with unless it was introduced to them by either a financial planner or through their employer as an added benefit. And long-term care insurance will and can pay for home care. It can help supplement the cost of assisted living. It's a wonderful benefit as long as you meet 2 to 3, usually on average, activities of daily living, which if you're looking for care, you usually will qualify for one of those. And then a lot of times there is a 100-day grace period where once you submit the application, once it's approved, then there's a grace period of about 100 days typically where you are paying out of pocket for the care until that 100th day. Then your long-term care policy starts paying out for your care. We've had families, Lori, that get 24/7 care, and they've gotten it for years, and it's all been paid 100% by their long-term care insurance policy. They paid I think it was an $80 premium when they got it, something like that. And that has more than paid for itself 10 times over again. Because, the cost of care continues to go up. And, families have a hard time, as any of us would, being able to afford 24/7 care when you're talking, thousands of dollars a month so that you can continue living in your home and have the support needed. Another way that is paid for is, again, if you have personal injury insurance on your car or maybe you were in an accident and that other person has personal injury coverage and you go after their insurance. But personal injury coverage is a great benefit. A lot of times people say, well, why do I need $1 million on this coverage? It's for situations like this. We had a client who was in a horrific accident and she was out of state, and her husband were in their car, stopped at a red light, and a young unlicensed woman driver had one of these monster trucks, and she was looking at her phone, looking down, looking anywhere but at the road, and full speed rear-ended right into their car, and they had like a sedan. And unfortunately the husband died at the scene. The wife was unconscious and severely injured. She suffered a neck break, and she became quadriplegic, and they actually had to transport her back to Michigan. And that insurance, though, allowed for her entire home to be remodeled and made fully handicap accessible, and it provided her with 24-hour, 7-day-a-week care, unlimited, because of that coverage. So you're looking at long-term care insurance, VA benefits, aid and attendance if you qualify as a wartime veteran or the spouse of a wartime veteran, and then the financial qualification after that step. And then there's private pay. Private pay is probably one of the most common because, again, a lot of people don't have these coverages. They don't need care because they were in an accident. They never purchase a long-term care insurance policy, and they may be a veteran like my father but never saw a war action. So then it's private pay. And those are pretty much the most common ways that people do pay for home care services. There are some others. You can do a reverse mortgage on your home. I don't get into that because I'm not a legal expert and a financial planner, but we have seen that done. There are some benefits, but there are some cons to doing that. But those are the common, most accepted ways people usually pay for home care.
Yeah, I wish I wish when this was a need in a doctor or hospital or clinic refer somebody out, that they would have something written specific with the definitions, because usually it's just set it up, and you're out the door and people don't know what to expect and what all it covers. I know we experienced that with a hospitalization for one of my loved ones. And I had a fairly good idea, but I wouldn't have known really what to expect if I wasn't in the industry. It's just like they'll take care of it. I mean, and because they're off and on to the next one, And then, excuse me, I think the other thing that people don't understand is still after COVID, they're not everybody's able to get out immediately. Like the hospital and the clinic will go, oh yeah, they'll get out there, tomorrow. And typically, from my experience in Minnesota, that is not happening. It takes a little bit longer, and we did it. It was probably a year ago. It was still 3 weeks out.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we're seeing too. We just had somebody who literally, Lori, had open heart surgery, had a quadruple bypass. They were in the hospital for a week, and they were going home, and they were given instructions that home health care will be lining up their physical therapy because it's very specialized with their condition, and they are 3 weeks out literally on this past Monday. And they just now got their first appointment for their intake. 3 weeks to get that after quadruple bypass.
Yeah, I know. I know. I had to. Excuse me. My allergies are just bugging me today. I know. I had to fight, and they ended up keeping Tom in the hospital an extra week and a half, and it was over his oxygen. And they're like, "Well, he can go home with oxygen." I'm like, "He can't walk." What part of this don't you get? Well, he'll have a cord. I don't care if he has a 50-foot cord. He can't walk.
And those cords can be dangerous too. He could have a fall.
We ended up fighting for the portables because he had a dog, he had a wife with dementia. I mean, there was just too many variables, and then he would have gotten tangled up in that in no time, So you really have to fight sometimes for advocacy to have them hold things in place until things are lined up. And boy, can that be emotionally draining. But I really appreciate you talking about the funding and the differences. I think that will help a lot of people. So thanks for doing that today.
Absolutely. I just want to share one last story that I just think is remarkable. You know, health insurance does not pay for home care, as I shared, nor does Medicare. But we did have one case several years ago where a case manager from one of the major health insurance providers called us, and instantly we say, well, we're home care, we're not. And they said, oh no, we know, and we know you're very confused why we'd be calling you for one of our insured. And they actually gathered their board together, or whoever the decision makers were, and they did make an exception and approved for this woman to get home care like we provide. And they paid for it directly through the health insurance. We've never seen that before. Anytime I've talked to anybody from the insurance companies or other, home care franchise thought leaders, anything, it's unremarkable. The insurance company even said it was unremarkable. And I said, well, because when I talked to her, I said, well, can I just ask what prompted you to make this decision? Well, we decided it would be more financially beneficial to us if we just paid for her to receive the care in home rather than place her in a facility. This woman was very sickly. It was almost like it was all like an ALS type illness. And I said, well, but couldn't that same argument be made for any patient you put in a nursing home? She said, well, you're absolutely right. She goes, maybe one day, the powers that be will look at it that way. But I just thought you're providing it. And I was very thankful. And so was this family, because they didn't want their sister, their mother, their wife to go into a nursing home. And so we just went right to her home. She was in her familiar, comfortable environment. She thrived there because her husband would come home at work at night, get to see him, her kids. And I just thought, but you can do it for her. Why not do it for the others too? That poor woman that has dementia who can't, living on a fixed income, but she has her husband's benefits and health insurance, putting her in a strange environment just to kind of be forgotten, so to speak, because the family's not, it's not as convenient for the family and different things. Maybe her granddaughter lives at home, and it would just be more beneficial. Wouldn't the same apply to her than it would this? I just never really understood that. But I'm hopeful that one day there will be more ways, because as you know, with this explosion in the baby boomer population, that's not going to stop until slow down, at least until around 2030. I mean, these facilities are going to be, full to capacity, and these families, want their loved ones at home.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and it is really interesting how they squeaked one through.
It really is. I've never, to this day, I still don't really understand it. I have a thought that maybe the husband really put up a fight and a stink and kind of kept protesting it, maybe. Because, I mean, the logic is logical. Yes, it is more affordable, and it would be more beneficial to the health insurance to keep her in the home than put her in a facility. But you could say that same argument for anybody, and she agreed with me. So I've never really understood why her and not pretty much anyone else.
Yeah, my thought, of course, always goes devil's advocate to, okay, somebody screwed up somewhere, and they're covering their butts in terms of that, or someone was very affluent and had a positioning, which I would hate for it to be that reason, but it just doesn't make any sense. And was Medicare really paying for it, or was it the company that was paying for it?
Well, she wasn't of Medicare age. This was her private health insurance through her husband's employer. And it's I won't name names, but it's one of the major insurers, and I have the same insurance. And I mean, it was funny. She goes, I know you're going to tell me you guys don't take, I know it, I understand. She goes, but we have a very special case here. And there, as far as we know, the family didn't have any real connection. Like, the husband had a typical job, so to speak, and it wasn't no affluence that I knew of. They just said financially it was going to be a lot more feasible for them to grant this. And it does. I mean, that makes total sense. But it didn't make sense when you then flip it around and say, like I said to her, I go, well, wouldn't that be the case for everybody? Because it is. The average nursing home costs per day right now for normal care, so it's not advanced specialized care, is $500 to $600 a day. You put somebody in there for 30 days, I mean, or even 100 days if they have supplement, it's outrageous.
Yeah. No, I agree. So, maybe complain to your insurance and just, you know, be be that one barking up the tree and going, everyone's talking about fraud and, being good servants of the money. This is kind of being ignored.
Yeah. And I would love it too, Lori. Maybe, if anybody listening or watching this has an experience similar to this woman's, I would love to hear about it. And I know you would too, because, maybe that was the start of something. It's the one and only we've ever encountered in, almost 15 years, but who's to say it hasn't happened other places?
Yeah, it would be really interesting. So please reach out to us and let us know. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Lance.
Always great to see you, Lori.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us again here at Conscious Caregiving with L&L, where we're tackling the tough conversations. We look forward to seeing you again here next month.